Ladies and gentlemen, my next guest, not to steal a line from David Letterman, but my next guest needs no introduction. This is Kelly the Car Mom, Kelly Stumpe. Kelly, welcome to Auto Insiders. How the hell are you today?
Ray, thank you so much for having me. Wow, I can't believe I'm an auto insider. That's super exciting. And I'm doing really well.
I've noticed that as the car mom, you are A, extremely in demand, and B, extremely busy. Um, how did you decide at a certain point? I mean, as a little girl, did you say to yourself, I want to grow up and be like, I don't know, a car insider person to help women particularly? I mean, when did this dream of being able to help women navigate car purchasing and things like that become something that you said, I think this is something I need to do?
I think people are always surprised to find out that I actually have like some really deep automotive roots.
Mhm.
So my grandpa started a used car lot in 1957. My dad and his brother grew it to a multi-group franchise.
Mhm.
So I always like grew up in the auto space, but more in the sense of like, oh yeah, like the dealership's fun to go to. Like, I get to buy candy out of the vending machine and I get a free balloon out of the helium tank. So like it was more like that was my experience in auto. I never really pictured it as a career
Mhm.
until I graduated college with a degree in equestrian science, which is the study of horses. And
Yeah.
then my father asked me what my plan was. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll try selling cars.
And
Um,
and did you do that? Did you sell cars for a while?
yes. So in 2016, my dad had just purchased a BMW store,
Okay.
and before he took over, it was a dumpster fire. Like we had to change the name, new ownership. Like it had a bad rap. Like we had the they when he took it over, there was new cars on the lot that were 2 years old. Like it was like new 2014s. Like it was a lot. So I started selling BMWs, and I think he thought that that would be a good place for me. The other brands he owns is Kia, Nissan, Hyundai, and Volkswagen.
Okay.
I thought I would do better at like a mass market thing and like maybe sell to my friends because like none of my friends are buying BMWs. He put me there, and I think in a way it was a more difficult. I think I had a more difficult time connecting with those customers because I'm not selling to 22-year-olds who are buying their first car. I'm selling to
Mhm.
men who are buying their fifth 5 Series, and I've never sold a car in my life. So I definitely found myself, and keep in mind, like I had never bought a car. My parents had never bought a car. Like I remember the first time I sold a car and realized that the person was going to have to pay sales tax on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. That's so expensive. And I'm looking back, I'm very grateful for that experience because I think there's a lot of people who are also incredibly ignorant to the car buying process. So
Mhm.
me being able to relate to, no, like I didn't know that either. Like I had no idea what a warranty was or what that included or, X, Y, and Z. I had no idea. So I really just spent the first couple of months learning about the car buying process, trying to wrap my head around BMWs and their different trim levels and engines. And it was in a way very intimidating. I was met with a
Sure.
lot of, a lot of sexism is just, I guess, what you call it. Like, not everyone wants to tell the 22-year-old girl like what they make every year on their credit app after they just tried to
Mhm.
like flex for the last 45 minutes of my time. So but I ended up really liking it, and I did connect with some really good customers, and we of course had used vehicles there too. So I found myself like always trying to sell the used cars to my friends, to other people, and I did it for about 2 years. I loved it. I was pretty good at it, I would
Uh-huh.
say. Um, and then I like wanted to stay in auto, but it was just hard when I had gotten married. I wanted to start a family, and you just look at these hours of the car business, and I'm like, wait, 12 hours? I'm like, well, all the daycares I'm looking at only go from 9 to 6. So like, who's gonna watch the baby till 9? And then I was like, can I leave a baby in that long if I want to breastfeed? And like all these things started, I was like, I don't know how this is really gonna work with the lifestyle that I wanted to have for myself. So I left that and I started working at a CRM for a couple of years, for 18
Mhm.
months. I did a CRM account management. It was fine. I mean, I liked talking to dealers, but I didn't like the work. And then I had a baby. And then I got pregnant with another baby. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I miss selling cars, I miss auto, and I'm just so sad. I remember telling my husband, I was like, I just can't believe that like the car business and motherhood just like don't mix. Like, I was just so good at that and I loved it, but like you just can't sell cars and be a mom. And I literally remember saying this. And then he was like, well, why don't you just sell cars to moms? And I was like,
Wow.
that's a good idea, Tyler. And
Yeah.
then, I started like rolling with that. I'm like, this is what I'll do. On my Tuesday park play dates, I'll bring the new minivans and I'll like try to sell the minivans to like the moms at the play date. And like, I'll just try to sell cars to moms by appointment. Like, I just thought I was going to just really focus on selling to St. Louis moms. But as I started creating content centered around that, it kind of just took off. And then I remember like checking like a month into me making these videos, I checked into my Instagram insights and my biggest audience was New York, and St. Louis wasn't even on my top 5.
Wow.
So I was like, maybe this is a little bit bigger than just selling cars to St. Louis moms.
Now, let me ask you a silly question. Your dad threw you into selling cars at the BMW dealership, and I take it that there wasn't a whole lot of training as to how you sell cars or word tracks, or, well, Kelly, you'll just figure it out. Is that how it went?
You know, yes and no. I did have very, very good managers at that store that
Hmm.
really and we were a very young staff because again, this dealership had a crap reputation. Like, I just don't think they could get anyone to work there. So we had a very young staff. Like, out of the 7 salespeople, I think 6 of us had never sold cars before. So
Wow.
we did a lot of role playing and training. And yeah, so I mean, in a way, like, it was a little bit like kind of like baptism by fire and learn by doing. And I think even with the best training, like, you still just have to get out there and do it and just focus on the relationships. But I would say I actually had a pretty good training experience.
And it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me that you kind of really loved it.
Oh, I so I remember like my first month, I was like, okay, this is kind of crazy. Like, I was just so overwhelmed by the cars. But then once I've always been like outgoing and I've enjoyed talking to people. And once I realized it actually wasn't that much about the horsepower of the BMW 3 Series and it was more about other things, it all started to click for me. And like my 4th month there, I was salesman of the month. And in my
Okay.
4th month, I sold 4 cars in one day. And I was like, this is it. Like, I get it. It's clicking, it's connecting. And being at a dealership, it's also just amazing the people who show up and don't work. And like, the good thing about me is I didn't have a lot of common with my coworkers because I was the only girl there.
Hmm.
So like, they're talking fantasy football and I'm like, yeah, you guys missed that up out there. Like, I just didn't have
Yeah.
any friends at work for a long time. I mean, I loved my managers, but I was just very much there to work and I had more fun talking to the customers.
I remember years ago in the early 80s, I was, how do I put this delicately? I was between wives. And somehow I had convinced the Atlantic City Press, the local newspaper there, to do an article about a day in the life of a sales manager. And the reporter came in, and at that time, it was okay to smoke. I mean, it wasn't really okay for you, but it was okay to smoke, and you were still allowed to smoke inside buildings, and you could smoke with your customers. And so there were cigarettes everywhere, and the phone was constantly ringing, and I was drinking chamomile tea to calm my stomach, because it was half days, the
Mhm.
9 in the morning till 9 at night. And the reporter said to me, she said, with all the stuff that's going on, she said, have you ever thought about getting out of the car business? And I think you can relate to this when I say this. And I looked at her and I said, you don't understand. You can leave your wife, but you can never leave the car business.
Yeah.
Okay. Once it gets in you, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what it sounds like happened to you.
Yeah. I
You know,
didn't want to leave. I didn't want to choose. And I think it's but I also think in a way, like, so much of the car business has been done the same for so long.
hmm
And it's been very fun to see like this next generation, including myself, like kind of navigate how we're going to just what it's going to look like.
hmm how we're going to change it.
Right.
And you and my son, God bless him, you guys are young enough to be able to make a difference. I'm old enough to hope that you succeed. Uh, but I won't be around long enough to really see the major changes that I think will be coming to the automobile industry, because of people like you and because of people like Zach. Um, because you hit on it when you said, gee, it wasn't really about horsepower and all that. Yeah, what it really is about is just connecting with the people that you're talking with.
Yeah.
And if you can make that human connection, it's suddenly you're not really talking about cars anymore. You're discussing needs and how you can help fill those needs on a human level. And yeah, you've got that naturally, I think.
Well, and it's why I think I'm very passionate about local family owned dealerships. I mean, one, like my whole livelihood was centered around local family owned dealerships. And now to see all of these other players trying to come into the game and think that they're going to do it better because they're taking out that aspect. And I mean, I understand, just like you do, like what people think of the industry and the bad eggs in the industry.
Hmm.
But I also understand that like the best salesperson at a family owned dealership is better than the best like Carvana chat you're ever going to have. Like I understand that. I want to focus on that part of the empowerment of both the dealers and the consumers to kind of just, I guess dismantle the stereotypes on both ends. Like I always say, or I used to say this when I was selling cars, it was like everyone's a Karen on the car lot. Like everyone's just here to hate me. It's constantly an
Hmm.
uphill battle. Everyone just wants to sit and complain. And no one wants to give the salespeople the benefit of the doubt and trust them. And I understand. And for some aspect, good reason. But I do think there's ways that we can, as an industry, we can connect good people to good customers and make that the preferred and better experience.
Um, and I agree with that. And one of the things I was, I've had uh, the pleasure of working for mom and pop organizations, where they've had one or two stores. I've had the opportunity to work for slightly larger organizations, and at one time for 11 and a half years, I worked for the Penske organization. So I know the differences between corporately owned and family owned.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people fail to recognize, and when I'm talking about customers, is especially in the family owned dealerships, like in your family, you guys are the main supporters of a lot of what goes on in your local communities.
Yeah.
Um, it's not uncommon for an automobile dealership to sponsor the Little League or sponsor this or sponsor that. It's one of the things I liked about a smaller group that I worked with is that I used to put it, we were good corporate citizens of the community. We were there to support it and be a part of it, and we were never running away from that. There was
I
an obligation
totally,
there.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and somehow we have to, in the industry, get some of those massive corporate dealerships to realize that there has to be a community connection.
Yeah.
And part of that community connection is how you go about selling the cars and some of the tactics that some dealers use. You're confronted with, your family's confronted with it on a daily basis, if being in the car business. So you have competitors out there that aren't necessarily going to advertise in the clearest manner possible,
Yeah.
with the hopes of either getting a click on the internet or getting the person to actually show up at the dealership. And it becomes incumbent upon those of us who are passionate about the industry and passionate about customers. How do we change that for the
Right.
better? Um, you're out there doing it every day. I mean, the car mom stuff is incredible. The growth that your channel has seen, your natural involvement with the industry is just, from somebody like me who spent 43 years in it, it's so refreshing to see.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, when you started at the BMW store, you said it, you were the only female there.
Yeah.
Okay. The guys were all concerned about fantasy football, and like at so many dealerships, when a customer would show up, salespeople become sighted and hearing impaired.
Yeah.
Even though they're there to sell a car, well, they're there to accept the sale if the customer insists upon it in many
Yeah.
cases.
And exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you saw the benefit of actually, I don't know, trying to connect with a customer.
And I think I've also, I mean, and I'm not saying this is like how to become the best salesperson ever, but it's certainly how to build trust. And I think not always making the sale of the car the goal is super important. And that's what I try to do in my content every single day. Like I try just to provide so much free, valuable content. I think even a salesperson, like they can do the same thing. Just provide good, valuable content and
Mhm.
information, and things will happen. Like, and I had a really good manager who told me, and like I've applied this to other aspects of my life, and he would tell me some days you plant and some days you harvest. And I would do a lot of planting and just
Mhm.
a lot of just connection and communication. And like, for a salesperson today, that might look like doing a YouTube video, making some voicemails, taking a couple of ups. And it's like, it doesn't always come together, but some days you get a big old harvest, and it's very,
Yes.
very nice.
That's what I used to when I worked as a salesperson. That's what I used to tell the
Did you
customer.
tell them that too?
Yes, I literally I used to say to them, "I am a farmer. My job is to plant the seed. Your job is to let me know when to harvest that seed."
Yeah, I love that.
Now,
I
if,
love
and,
that.
and if I do my job really, really well, we're going to plant the seed and harvest on the same day. But the likelihood of that happening
Yeah,
is not very strong. So I'll answer whatever questions you have. I'll provide whatever information I can so that when you are ready to harvest, you will come to me and say, it's
yeah,
time for you to get what you planted. And
exactly.
yeah, it didn't take me long in the industry to realize it's all about making a human connection. That if you can't connect with your customer on a human basis at some point, well, then there's no reason for the customer to say,
Yeah,
yes, I'd like to buy a car from you.
yeah. And it's just also, I mean, sometimes there's such a lack of empathy and understanding of what kind of financial decision you're asking somebody to make after 45 minutes with you. Like
Mhm.
it's just it's it's not what people are going to do. They don't like it, and that's why they feel the pressure. And like, the sad part is, and my dad's always told me this, like, buying a car is fun, being sold is not.
Yes.
So it's, how do you assist in the buying, and how do you, I mean, be a good salesperson and sell your product well. And there's nothing wrong with that, but no one wants to feel like they got sold or feel like they got taken advantage of. But they
Mhm.
want they want to buy a car. Everyone who comes to a dealership wants to buy a car, and I think people just forget that and try to take you know, and sometimes they make it too much of a numbers game. Like, I get it. Like, you have 30% closing ratio. Sure. Take 10 ups, you'll sell 3 cars. You'll live your happy salesperson life. But
Yes.
it's more, I don't think selling cars is quite such a numbers game.
Well, there's some old sayings in the car, or one particular old saying that I remember that I learned about back in the 70s when I started, and it was the feel of the wheel seals the deal. Okay,
Right.
so in other words, you've got to get your customer to test drive that vehicle. If they don't test drive it, if they don't get excited by that test drive, then you're more than likely not going to sell them a car. And when I was a manager, I used to preach to my salespeople, it's the feel of the wheel helps, but my saying was, if you give your customer a good show, they'll part with their dough. In other words, make it fun for them,
Yeah.
make it entertaining for them. Um, I used to look at it that we're going after people's discretionary income the same way that, well, in St. Louis, the St. Louis Cardinals go after people's discretionary income. It's how are you going to spend your money to be entertained? And when you're spending as much as we ask people to spend to buy a car, why shouldn't you be entertained when you're doing that? Why shouldn't that be a fun experience?
Yeah.
Sounds to me you figured that out, that it should be. At the very least, I know I wanted to have fun doing it.
Oh,
That's what
yeah.
yeah, that's what I used to tell the customers. I said, "My God, you know how much you hate this? Well, hell, I've got to try and do this 7, 8 times a day."
I know.
Yeah, you know,
I know.
I
So
think I
true.
might hate it more. Um, Here's a question for you. You're Kelly the car mom. You're Kelly, the real mom. You're Kelly, the wife. How do you find time to do all of that?
You know, it I think luckily the job offers a lot of great flexibility and I have a great support system. I mean, that's no secret.
Mhm.
There, in a way though, is a lot of decisions I have to make every day on not necessarily taking the car mom exactly where I always want to take it. And that's something I've talked to Zach about a lot
Yeah.
is, it's just not really my season to like do this startup grind and like, hire all these other writers and employees and like turn this into what I know it could and what I know it will be one day because of
Mhm.
just the phase of my life that I'm in. I've got 3 kids under the age of 5 right now. And that's what makes the content good and helpful and relatable, but that's also what takes priority. So right now it's actually like it's I don't want to say I'm doing the bare minimum, but I'm doing what I have to do to keep an engaged audience. And when I
Mhm.
have the time to really sell that audience a product or a way of buying cars or whatever it's going to be, they're going to be there, hopefully ready and waiting for me. So and it's tough. And like a lot of this job, there's a lot of travel that would be better and I would have more following and get more views if I did more travel. There's new
Mhm.
vehicles being released every single week and there's new opportunities coming up and they all require travel and I just am not at the part of my life where I can do that. So it's just saying, okay, if you really want me to get behind the wheel of the new Lexus TX, then I suggest you drive it to St. Louis and I will do my tour here. And luckily I've built an audience that will wait until that
Mhm.
tour comes out.
So if I heard what you're saying correctly, I think what I heard is you, your priority right now is to be Kelly the mom.
Well, yes. And it was
And by the way, how is Fred?
Fred is good.
Good.
Fred
Good.
Fred is good. He has some issues, but we're working through them. Nothing serious, thank goodness.
Okay.
Just enough for several doctor's visits. But I think that it started off like super flexible and great, and then it quickly turned into what did I just do? Like this should be the world's most flexible job, and I'm working till 9 p.m. every night, and my husband had to go pick the kids up from school today. It's like what did I do? Like how did we get here? So it's been having to scale back and just be a little bit more selective and ultimately also always put my audience first and just prioritize that way. So it's what content would they find the most helpful and I'm also so lucky because I just have such good access to cars. Like I
Mhm.
know, like I understand the privilege of being able to go on 6 different dealerships and just grab the keys and not have to tell anyone what I'm doing. And we always have new cars coming in, and so it works out very well. But yeah, I'm kind of in my mom phase right now. I really am, and I'm enjoying it.
As well you should,
Yeah,
and if I may, I'll share a little story with you real quickly.
please.
Um, you know my son Zach. I also have a daughter Dara who last month turned 30, and I don't want you to think that being a mom ends as your kids get older, because I can tell you, being a dad, it doesn't ever end. And some of the greatest joy that you will ever experience in your life is watching your children grow into just wonderful, caring, loving
Yeah,
human beings that want to make some type of difference in this world. Um, my daughter works in communications. I guess you could say Zach works in communications. Uh, and and just the drive that both of my children have, the joy that I take from seeing them develop into the people that they've become. It you're just at the beginning phase.
oh no, I know, and that's what's like, that's why this timing of like this thing blowing up has been fun, but it's also been overwhelming. But like it would have never blown up if I wouldn't. It's like so hard when it's like I would not be the car mom without my children. So
Of course.
like they make it, like they're such a big part of the content, and not only the content, but of how I'm able to help these mothers navigate the situation. I mean, so much of it can only come from experience. Like if there was I can tell you which cars are good for 3 kids because I have 3 kids and I drive a bunch of
Yes.
different cars. So I'm very grateful that I'm able to really capture the content and capture the experience in a way that I know I'll be able to help families for future. And the good news is I have like 3 sisters. So like when I'm done having babies, they'll be having babies, and like
Mhm.
we'll just keep it coming.
Um, what aspect of being the car mom brings you the most joy?
That's an excellent question. I think I'm always happy when people find my vehicle reviews helpful, but
Mhm.
I am so much more passionate about the car buying side of things because I just think that's what I love to do, and I love talking about it, and I love advising it, and I love empowering women through it. So I get a lot of stories of women who, and a lot of really heartfelt stories of women who would be like lost their husband or lost their father and never thought they'd be able to buy a car without them, which is like so crazy that women are still feeling like they can't go into a dealership without a man in like 20. I mean, are we
Mhm.
serious? But my content gave them the confidence, gave them the knowledge, and gave them the empowerment to be able to go do it. So it's just providing that education around what it actually takes to buy a car, which I I love doing that.
I take it you get a certain sense of satisfaction
Yeah.
knowing that you have helped somebody through what for most people is a pretty traumatic experience when it comes to buying, and especially for women. I heard it for 43 years that a husband and wife could come into the dealership and it was the wife's car, and yet the salesperson would never acknowledge the wife
Yeah.
and always just talk to the salesperson. It was like, I don't know how many times I could say to the salespeople, if there's two people there, there's two people you need to be
Yeah.
talking to.
Yeah.
Okay. It
Well, and it is so like I think a reason I am able to relate to that so well is it's like the exact same thing that happened to me when I was selling cars. Like so many times I would, my manager would always come out and say hello, and then like they thought that like I wasn't the one selling the car, and like they would always just be like, well, can you just bring that guy back out and can we just talk different about it? I'm like, no, this is his like it's just it was crazy to see just where that disconnect is. And another thing that brings me a lot of joy is when people follow my advice centered around car buying and then realize like it wasn't as bad as they were expecting. And I think that's also, and I also attribute that to the industry evolving for the work that, you and I are both doing and everybody else who's just, I love when, even more than like, I got a great deal and I stuck it to them. I love when they're like, you know what? It was the nicest salesperson and it was a great experience. I'm like, yes, that is
yeah,
even better than like, that's the best.
it is the best because it means that everybody won.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Well
it
said.
you know, it doesn't really have to be a battle. It's not a war of attrition. It should be a collaborative effort getting to a common goal. A customer comes in, they wanna get a car. The salesperson's there, they wanna sell a car. But if we work together, we can figure out how to make that happen,
Yeah.
and we can figure out how to make that happen in a positive manner. Y I've probably said this a million times. Those who can afford to pay the least typically pay the most, and those who can afford to pay the most typically pay the
I
least.
like that.
Now, those who pay the most complain the least, and those who pay the least complain the most.
I
Uh,
yes, yes,
and
yes,
and
yes.
and there is something wrong with that because it should be that everybody feels good about what has just transpired,
Mhm.
and too many times people don't, and they feel like, oh my, I really raked the dealer over the coals.
Yeah.
The idea shouldn't be for the customer to rake the dealer over the coals or for the dealer to rake the customer over the
Yeah.
coals. Okay.
Totally.
Yeah, the idea should be, hey, they need a car, I need to sell a car. Let's figure out how to make that crap happen.
Yeah.
It's really, at least in my mind, not all that hard. But there are a lot of dealers, as you know, that don't necessarily always play fair, and it's those bad actors that make it bad for those that do try to play fair. I know Zach's been out and spoke with you in St. Louis and with your family. I know the way your family operates their dealerships. It's not it's not the let's try and rip somebody's head off.
Yeah.
How does your family deal with competitors that, I don't know, don't want to be as nice to customers as your group is?
Well, I think what helps, I mean, what does help is like being in St. Louis for so long and having such good repeat customers.
Hmm.
And then we also put a really big emphasis on our service. So I mean, people like people buy cars where they service from a lot of the time too. So we have a very, very good, which I've never worked in it, so I don't know a lot about it, but I know we have a very, very good service department that,
Hmm.
and we are very, very proactive with finding in a no pressure way, but finding opportunities in service to help people upgrade their cars. I mean,
Sure.
and I always struggle with the job of being the car mom and being conscious of budgets. And there's the whole like Dave Ramsey method of like buy a clunker and like live like that. And then there's this whole like, okay, but there's like brand new life-saving technology on these new cars. And so like as a mother and as someone who speaks to mothers, I'm always trying to find the balance of like, don't put your family in financial hardship.
Hmm.
Also, like, let's get a safe and good vehicle. So it's a balance, but they're very proactive with presenting numbers to service customers, calling for trades, and then a lot of deals can get put together that way. I mean, I just don't think people always know what they have, especially lately. No one's understood, or not no one, but not everyone understood how much their car was worth and how
Hmm.
much nicer of a car you could get for the same payment. And the reality is so much of America is just like committing to a car payment the rest of their life. Like most
Yes.
people are just like, and you know what? Like, I'm not going to judge anyone for that, because if you want to buy a nicer, newer, safer vehicle every 4 years and just keep your payment and just, work a payment into your life, that's fine. I don't think I'm not going to tell anyone that's not a good idea. So, but I think people like to be able to upgrade their cars, and it's just, showing people that's an option if it works for everybody.
And to piggyback on that, most people say, well, when I would talk to them about, do you want to lease it or do you want to own it? And they go, well, I only want to own my cars. Okay, great. Um, how long have you had this car? Well, I've had it 3 years. Okay, great. And it's a 6 year note that you have on it. Well, yeah. Um, and I used to work in states that were title holding states. So, in other words, you didn't get your title until you paid off the car loan.
Yeah.
And I used to look at the customer. I said, "So you own your car, right?" You go, "Yeah." I go, "Where's your title?" Well, the bank has it. So you don't really own your car. The
Yeah.
bank owns your car.
Yeah.
And so if what you're concerned with is the most car for the cheapest payment, there are ways for you to do that that could be beneficial if you're willing to accept the premise, as most people are in this country, that you will always have a car payment.
Yeah.
I don't know very many people that pay cash for a car.
And again, I don't know if it's even what I would recommend. I don't know if I would recommend buy a car and drive it until the wheels fall off. Like I do wish we could have dealers do a better job of like taking the time in a non-consenting way to kind of like spend some time more educating the customer on what they're getting themselves into and like what their
Hmm.
options are at the end. Like I find it so strange that so many dealers are so coy about like a lease return and like what that
Yeah.
looks like and like how long it's going to take. And I also think they're so interested in selling the car right then and there that they don't talk through the customer like, okay, it's like you want to buy this car, you're going to own it for 6 years. And not everyone can do this because not everyone has my skill set. But like, so you have one kid now. How many kids are you going to have over the next 6 years? Like, I know it's hard to predict, but what do you think? Because I had 3 kids in 4 years. So
Sure.
imagine what the car I would have bought in 2019 versus the car I'd buy in 2023. Very different cars. And if I
Yes.
would have bought the Ford Explorer and I was pregnant with my first because it has a third row and we're going to use it, and this is probably plenty of trunk space, and then I would have had to get out of it on year 3 to get a Ford Expedition, I would not be in a good financial situation. So
Exactly.
and that's where I think people just where cars get too expensive, where salespeople and customers don't agree because they just don't realize the investment and what it really means long term.
I know I used to I can't recall the number of times. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of times in my career where I would literally sit down with a customer and explain to them why it is not in their best interest at this particular moment in time to trade in the car they presently have to get into the next car and roll all that negative equity into the next car. And you need to, sometimes as salespeople, we need to abandon the concept of selling something today so that we better serve the customer in the future,
Yeah.
so that they'll not only will they appreciate what we saved them today, they'll reward us with their business going forward because we did that.
I I think so. And I know it's a hard concept on both ends of the aisle. And that's where I just sometimes I think what's hard about the car industry is there's just not quite the experience in the sales staff as like there are in some other industries because we have so much turnover.
Mm-hmm.
But it's even like, what I tell a lot of my following now, which, you would never find a salesperson to say this to somebody. But like, if you are the kind of person who, like, let's say, doesn't know what kind of car they're going to want in 3 years and leasing is too expensive or whatever, or you don't want to do it, or you drive too many miles, let's go to the used car market. Like,
Yes.
and like, let's shop pre-owned. You can buy a new car more often if you're in the pre-owned market. And there's just not, and I don't know. I don't really have an answer because it is difficult because then as a salesperson, like you don't want to dive too into like the financial planning aspect, but I'm talking to a woman right now and she has 20K of inequity and she is pregnant with her third and her car's not going to work. Like, and I can tell her car, I agree with her. Her car's not going to work. She's pregnant with twins.
Mm-hmm.
What is she supposed to do?
Yes.
What
Uh,
she's,
uh, how do you help her? How do you, because that situation is going to require money.
which is why a lot of times I actually tell, which dealerships couldn't do this because they would not, that this isn't a good idea. But I try to tell my audience a lot, like, you do not need to upgrade your car for your first child. Like a car seat can fit in a Toyota Camry. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
just, there's so much like consumerism out there. And it's always like, I need the mom car. I need the mom car. I'm like, no, you don't. Like
Yeah.
the Ford Focus will work. You have one kid.
Yes.
Like, let's just see where we're at. And then let's upgrade when we're pregnant with our third. And then you'll have a better idea of what your needs actually are. Because I'm telling you, I see it every day. These families upgrading on their first kid. They have no idea how many kids they're going to have in how many years, how big a double stroller is, how big car seats are, how long kids are in car seats for. I have seen my audience get in really bad situations.
And a lot of people have unfortunately put themselves in these bad situations because so many people I know today it's 6 year notes and 7 year notes and in some cases 8 year notes, 96-month financing for people. And I don't think people realize what they're getting into if they're in 84-month or 96-month loans.
Yeah.
And they
No,
want
they
to make
don't.
a change. Yeah, if they want to make a change 4 years into an eight
I know.
8 year loan, the amount of negative equity that they're going to bring into that next transaction is going to shock them.
Yeah. And they didn't put money down and they deferred their payments. And it's just like, it is. Yeah. And the cars are just becoming more and more, I mean, borderline unaffordable. Like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to advise. I truly don't know what I'm supposed to advise these families anymore. They can't afford these full-size vehicles.
We were talking, Zach and I, the other day. There was a survey that was done asking people about whether or not they thought they could buy a new car. 83% of respondents said they no longer felt like they could afford a new car. 83%. Okay, that only leaves 17% of the population that feels like they're in a financial position that they could afford to go out and buy a car. And I rail on manufacturers every day because we're to the point where the vast majority of the population can no longer afford to buy what it is that they're building and we're trying to sell.
Yeah.
And that is really unfortunate because people aren't going to stop having children. People's needs aren't going to dissipate to the point where they're not going to need another vehicle. And I don't know how people are supposed to do it. With you, how do you? I don't know how to advise people. Much like you,
I've kind of, I mean, and I'm kind of in between like a car reviewer or like a publication, and I'm kind of like, I'm in between somewhere because I'm the only car reviewer who does anything with used vehicles. And I've really tried to switch a lot of my content and my focus to hyping up some of these used vehicles, which you have to also remember, like the average car on the road is 12 years old. So so many of these car reviewers are like, look, ambient lighting, like surround view camera, like all this crap. And it's like, guess what? It's a keyless entry. So like, let me explain this to you. And like these people have their minds blown because their vehicle is 12 years old. And it's one thing I've always been good at is getting people excited about minor things because they are exciting if you don't have them. But I've really tried to shift a lot of my focus to talking about used vehicles. And I've done a lot of content recently on why 100,000 miles isn't too many miles. And it's that same thing we talked about with new cars. It's let's slow down. So why do you think 100,000 miles is too many? Oh, because I want to keep this. How long do you want to keep it for? 5 years. Okay. How many miles do you drive a year?
15,000.
Yeah.
10,000, whatever it is. Yeah.
So in 5 years, you're going to put 50,000 miles on a car and it's going to have 150,000 miles. That car's going to be fine. And like a well-maintained car with 100,000 miles, I'd put my money on that making it to 200 than a brand new one. Like, what are we really talking about? I mean, like that at least has some proven reliability and some history with it. So I've really tried to start talking about the used car market and just kind of like hype it up because everyone wants to talk about what's shiny and new, but we can't, it's borderline like unrelatable at this point to talk about a $65,000 car.
And, all the wonderful features that these vehicles have, somehow we lived without them for, I don't know, a long, 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 long time.
And they're, and they're not, they got a lot better. Like I think especially in like 16, 17, 18, we saw so much crash prevention tech come up. Like, and I'm such a big crash prevention, crash avoidance. Like I love the automatic braking. I love the pedestrian. I love all of that. Now, so much of that is standard and on used vehicles anyway. We're like, you know what you're missing with a new car? Wireless Apple CarPlay and a wireless charger. Guess what? Never works anyway. Like ambient lighting, who cares? Google, who cares? Like there's nothing on them recently that makes that is that exciting to me, truly.
I agree with you. I drive minis, and I use an Android phone.
We have nothing in common. I'm just kidding.
Well, come on, I'm 72. You're not. And my point is that my Mini has Apple CarPlay. It's great for when Zach drives my car. It doesn't have Android Auto. The car works just fine without me being able to wirelessly somehow connect my. I don't know. Don't tell anybody, but hell, I even drove cars before they invented the cell phone. I don't know how we did that. Okay. So I guess the point I was trying to make is there's a lot of wonderful stuff in cars that literally don't mean anything.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how 90% of the stuff in my car works because I never need it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for most cars today. So yes, I agree with you. Putting people into slightly older used cars that might not have all the latest tech that today's car has, but has more than enough tech for them to get by, they're better off.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Man, you got me worn out thinking about all this stuff. All my whole life has kind of flashed before my eyes doing this conversation with you. Where do you see yourself as the car mom 5 years from now?
I want to continue to propel the car mom forward to truly be like a publication and a resource that exists with me and with other people as well. Like I feel very passionately about making sure other mothers' voices are amplified and like it's not just one mom from Missouri's review about the vehicle. So I definitely want to be able to give other mothers a platform to talk about cars. And I want to like be, I guess in a way, a household name, like a big dream of mine is, you know how like manufacturers will advertise if they were like like car and driver's car of the year. Like
Yes.
I want my logo up there too. Like I want to be able to be like, oh my gosh, we're going to advertise that we were the Car Moms family car of the year. Like I think that would be really cool. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then, maybe honestly, I would like to get into retail auto again.
Uh-huh. As a salesperson or as a manager or as the dealer principal?
I think dealer principal.
I think that would be a wise choice. I and I don't want you to think I'm patronizing you when I say this, but I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that our industry and our country would be better off if more women participated in it at a higher level of management
Yeah.
than what we presently have. Women have a way of typically being able to bridge divides and build consensus, and men don't. And and so I think more females owning dealerships would go a long way to improving the dealership experience and the buying experience. So God bless you.
Yeah.
I want you to do
No,
that.
I really, and it really just comes down to like, I'm just so passionate about retail auto. And I can't even explain why. And, like, would it be cool to have like to design a car with a manufacturer? Sure. Like I would do that. But like, I am more excited about the idea of like having a dealership and like really just shaking it up and just being like, just helping these like family-owned dealerships not go out and just like, and I mean, I hate when I hear like Ford's trying to get rid of their dealers and CarMax is doing this and Carvana is doing this and Vroom's doing this. And I just don't want to like, I'm just like not going to sit by and watch all these dealerships die and not get into not get into 2024. And they have a long ways to go. So, if I could ever have the opportunity to help on a more mass market scale, I want to. And I think I have a really good read. I think I have probably the best read on what the female consumer is looking for.
Oh, I think absolutely you do. And I rail on bad dealerships all the time. There there's no way for me to sugarcoat it. If you're not doing it the right way, then you shouldn't be in the business.
Yeah.
You just shouldn't. I mean, there's so many dealerships out there that the whole premise of the business is based on deception, and usually starts with how they advertise the price of the car, and then it just builds. The deception it continues to build beyond that. I would love to see the future of the industry be where, as an industry, we realize that it's a collaborative thing between dealer and customer, and that uh, as opposed to where we think we're adversaries,
Yeah.
we don't have to be adversaries. It can be collaborative. There are ways to change the industry for the better, for both the dealer and the customers.
Yeah.
I believe the large, giant public groups, um, unfortunately, they have the money to be able to buy up so many of the smaller dealers, but you lose something when the dealer operator isn't really a member of the community. And so, yeah, I don't have any money to throw into your dealership, but if I did, I would throw it into you, so you can get the
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's on my 5-year plan. I've got a few things in motion, so we'll see.
Well,
We'll see what happens.
now, could you do me a favor and could you share with our audience out there how they can find out more about Kelly the Car Mom and everything it is that you do?
Sure. Well, you can find us over on Instagram or TikTok at The Car Mom. Our
Okay.
website is thecarmom.com, where we post a lot of really good vehicle reviews and content centered around car buying and car selecting. My YouTube tours are hosted on my YouTube. My vehicle tours are hosted on YouTube, and we have a podcast called The Carpool. So I'm like all over the place.
You are, as they used to say in the old days, you're like horse poop. You're everywhere.
I like that.
Yeah. Um, I can't thank you enough, Kelly, for spending time with me today. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Same here.
You are a breath of fresh air for the industry, and I wish you nothing but continued success moving forward. Enjoy your husband, Tyler. Enjoy your children, um, and and remember to keep your children first.
Yes, thank you. I
Okay.
will.